So this was my first direct, strong instructions from Srila Prabhupada. I take that instruction very, very seriously. And if you don't see me around, it usually means that I'm just chanting. When you're reading, when you're doing your service, you're on a different platform because you really have taken shelter of the holy name. And Prabhupada's response was, he said, my books are your deities.
Hare Krishna. My name is Sri Krishna Chaitanya Swami, and I'm with the ISKCON Kirtan Ministry. And it's my great honor and pleasure to be here today with Her Grace Daivi Shakti Mataji, who was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in August of 1970. I'd like to ask Mataji if she can kindly share some of the instructions that Srila Prabhupada gave you on the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra.
When I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada, he had already started phase 2 of ISKCON. He had just left Los Angeles to return to India for the World Sankirtan Party. And being a new devotee, although all of us wanted to accompany Prabhupada to India, I wasn't qualified to go. My husband was the temple president of Philadelphia. So Prabhupada initiated me by letter. And in the letter, of course, we chant 16 rounds, study Prabhupada's books scrutinizingly. And then after Prabhupada spent 1 year, he came back to New York, 1971, I think it was July. So we went to meet Prabhupada. It was the first time I got to be with Prabhupada personally. And Prabhupada gave me second initiation at that time. So when I was alone with Prabhupada, I asked if I could ask him a question. He said yes, and I asked, I haven't been able to serve you in rapt attention. Is there anything I can do to serve you? And Prabhupada said, Chant Hare Krishna. And then I asked, is there anything more? He said, well, you can serve your husband. Then I said, well, we don't get along so well. He said, then for Prabhupada, it was no problem. And he said, then be a pujari. There's so many things. So having given me Gayatri Mantra then, I went back to our temple in Philadelphia. And my husband said, okay, now you're going to be the pujari. And we have 6 offerings. And every time you make an offering, you have to chant the Gayatri Mantra. And as I told Prabhupada, we don't get along. I said, yes, but Prabhupada just told me to chant 3 times a day. Now you're saying to chant 6 times a day. It's argumentative. So I said, I'm going to write to Prabhupada and ask about this. So I wrote to Prabhupada and I just simply said to him, is it all right to chant Gayatri Mantra more than 3 times a day? Without explaining why I was asking the question. So Prabhupada assumed that I wanted to chant more than 3 times a day. And Prabhupada wrote me back a letter. He said, why are you going to Gayatri Mantra? Hare Krishna Mantra means more than any other mantra. It is the most powerful mantra. You have facility to chant Hare Krishna 24 hours, so do it. So this was my first direct, strong instructions from Srila Prabhupada. And being a young, I was 19 at the time, young kid, I thought, well, Prabhupada has just told me to chant Hare Krishna 24 hours a day. And I tried to do it. I'm still trying to do it. But then, as the years go by in Krishna consciousness, you learn that kirtan, just as we have the perfection, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, the hearer who attained perfection was Parikshit Maharaj. And the kirtan leader, that was Sukadev Goswami. And he wasn't only chanting Hare Krishna, he was chanting the glories of Krishna. And then learning more, one very, very unforgettable lesson that I learned was during Prabhupada's disappearance time, just days before he left, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami had come here to run the science conference with this top scientists here in India. And Prabhupada was very interested in what was going on there. He couldn't personally go because he couldn't move at the time. He sent his sculpture of his bust to be present, and they would garland his bust every day. And then Srup Damodar would come and tell him what the conversation was, what the meeting was about each day. And Prabhupada was extremely interested in everything that was being reported to him. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was there listening, he felt that the conversation was too exhausting for Prabhupada. So at one point, he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, why don't we just chant Kirtan now? And Prabhupada immediately said to him, this is also Kirtan. So my understanding of Kirtan and to always chant Hare Krishna began to broaden as I tried to understand what it means 24 hours to be engaged in chanting Hare Krishna. For instance, preaching can also be considered Kirtan. And being a book distributor, this is a service Prabhupada gave me to constantly be preaching, chanting Hare Krishna through your preaching, distributing Prabhupada's books. That's another form of Kirtan. And even in our dreams, when you're preaching all day, when you're giving classes, when you're distributing books, even in dreams, that's what we do in our dreams. I go to Kirtan programs, I'm giving lectures in dreams. So it becomes a 24-hour process of chanting Hare Krishna. And now it's been 53 years, and I hope that before Krishna has me give up this body, I can accomplish that first instruction that Prabhupada gave me, that you have facility to chant Hare Krishna 24 hours to do it. Because that'll be the perfection of my life, to be ever engaged in Kirtan and glorifying Krishna. So that's the first and the most important instruction I got from Srila Prabhupada.
Beautiful. It's
Thank you.
amazing. Amazing instruction.
Whole life Kirtan.
I hope we can also take that to heart and develop that similar mood of 24 hours a day, whole life.
Yeah.
Kirtan. It's wonderful.
And when not preaching, there's japa. Japa is unlimited. 16 rounds on your beads, 100 rounds off your beads. And japa, all the time in between, I engage in chanting japa. Unlimited, no limit. Whenever there's time, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada said, don't waste time.
Yes.
Chant Hare Krishna.
Yeah. And I also learned from cooking for Prabhupada and taking care of his house here. Prabhupada would give me different instructions how to become more efficient. And he arranged it so that I could get my rounds done before I started the cooking. And I found that when he did make that change in my schedule, everything became more efficient. If I got my rounds done before I started service, then there would be no flaws in the service. And if my rounds weren't done, then I was sure to make some type of mistake because the consciousness wasn't clear enough. So even in our ordinary services, whatever they might be, if we first purify ourselves by the chanting of Hare Krishna, minimum 16 rounds, then our service will go on very nicely. And the more we chant, the better the service becomes. That's my experience in devotional service. So sometimes I'll chant so much before I begin my temple services, and then I'm assured that the results are better in the sense of more efficient. I can do more in less time in fulfilling Prabhupada's specific orders to me.
It's like sharpening the saw.
Yes, yes, it is. Cleansing the mind, Cheto Darpana.
Beautiful. That's a very helpful tip.
Very much so. And that's, you know, I'm just giving, so you don't have to go through what I went through. Believe me, if you get your rounds chanted early in the morning, more rounds, you don't have to stop at 16. You chant until you feel the real purification, then you start your service nicely.
It's like putting gas in the tank.
Fill up, yeah.
Charging.
Yes.
Get charged.
Yes, get charged.
And can you share with us what your realization, experience of what was the most powerful chanting experience that you experienced?
Yes, well, that, when I went to live in Mayapur, because it's a place for kirtan and shravanam and kirtan, I actually took that instruction very, very seriously. And on days that I didn't have service, I would just chant all day and night, just to experience if it was possible to chant 24 hours. And I found that chanting was the most wonderful experiences of my life, to really just chant. And then when you're reading, when you're doing your service, you're on a different platform because you really have taken shelter of the holy name. So I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. Not everyone has a taste for just chanting. But in my own life, because I was injected with that instruction from Prabhupada to chant 24 hours, I take that instruction very, very seriously. And if you don't see me around, it usually means that I'm just chanting. And that chanting can be japa, which is a very important part of our sadhana, or preaching, book distribution, anyway, anyhow, some type of kirtan 24 hours a day. You got a staunch kirtaniya here, but not the
Stereotypical.
the loud, yeah, right, exactly.
So constantly be engaged in chanting and different varieties of chanting.
Yes, yes, that I've learned. That kirtan means many, many. It's broad spectrum.
Broad spectrum kirtan.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Many devotees, they're involved in different forms of shravanam and kirtanam and hearing and chanting. And how do devotees understand how to balance the hearing and the chanting and the broad spectrum? Which spectrum to choose and how to engage?
That might change according to one's maturation, we could say. Because when we're young and have a lot of energy, then we're able to do things that we can't do when we're much older and our physical capabilities diminish. So in our youth, we should use all of our youthful energy for kirtan, sankirtan, preaching, traveling, carrying out Lord Chaitanya's mission. And then inevitably, because the body wears down, it's the 6 transformations, as we're, reach the top and then we're going down on the other side of the hill, as our physical capabilities might diminish, then we might take more shelter in chanting not so publicly, or reading more, enriching ourselves so that our chanting becomes more relishable. And that will happen naturally in your service if you're in the association of devotees, because let's say, now I'm 72, and I started at age 18. So at that, within those 54 years, the services have certainly changed. But the ambition to always chant Hare Krishna has not changed. So just according to the physical and mental situation, we adjust our schedules, adjust our services, so that we can always be engaged in kirtan. And that just due to health reasons, due to physical, due to mental things, because even mentally, for instance, we take prasadam, and that prasadam is for nourishing the body, building our spiritual body. But sleep also. Sleep is the food for the mind. So we have to we have to be regulated so that we get enough sleep so that our mind is working properly. We take prasadam, sattvic prasadam, and things that will keep us healthy. So that might take a little bit of fine-tuning. In our youth, we might not understand all the details of how we're going to stay healthy and how to be regulated because we're so exuberant to do service. But as we mature in our devotional service, we learn, yeah, I really do need 6 hours. I can't make it on 2.5 hours. I've tried that. You can't do that. So you just learn, unfortunately, by our mistakes, watching other devotees, what they do wrong, watching what does work. And you kind of have to, especially if you're living in Vrindavan or not under the thumbnail of temple authorities, you have to learn to fly your own airplane. You have to learn how to, what works for you so that you can serve and chant and read and balance all these things, keep your health adjusted at the same time. And that you're going to have to learn by reading about Prabhupada's life, studying the lives of the great devotees in Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, applying things and see what actually works for you. Like, for instance, at one point, while Prabhupada sent us out traveling and preaching on book distribution, we had no temples here in India, just, the shack in Bombay and construction site here, construction site Mayapur, a little rented house in Delhi, construction in Hyderabad. There was no temples. So, but even whatever we had, it meant we had devotee association and prasadam and kirtan and all the things that nourish us. But out on the road, we had nothing. So coming back from one trip, I asked my husband, because I was busy doing service for Prabhupada, please ask Prabhupada if we could have some traveling deities so that we can make some type of sadhana. And Prabhupada's response was, it was as if he was insulted. He said, my books are your deities. They are Shabda Brahman. They are transcendental sound vibration. You worship my books. So therefore, Prabhupada saved me in one sense because I never engaged in, aside from when Prabhupada told me to be a pujari and I was worshiping in the temple, Radha Govinda in New York and other temples. Prabhupada sent me to Delhi for 6 months, worshiping Radha Parthasarathi day and night. But personally, I never established any personal deities. Prabhupada's books are my deities. And the way I worship these deities is I read them. I distribute them to other people because that's giving Krishna, putting Krishna in their hands. And I apply what I read in my life. And the one message you'll get in every book of Srila Prabhupada's is to chant Hare Krishna. If you can't do anything else, you chant Hare Krishna. So as the life airs diminish in old age, more time is spent in chanting, less time in my active preaching because I just don't have the energy anymore, and really taking shelter of the holy name more and more as old age captures me.
It's nice, balanced approach to your services, and it's amazing how Srila Prabhupada gave this realization that the deities are actually his books, his transcendental literature.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier that by reading, one can enhance one's chanting.
Yes, of course. All of Prabhupada's books, all of our activities actually, Prabhupada gave us all these festivals and temples and so many programs because we were unable to chant Hare Krishna because of our passionate natures. When Prabhupada told the devotees in the very beginning to chant 64 rounds every day, they couldn't do it. All right, then 32 rounds. They couldn't do it. Okay, minimum 16 rounds. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he had his standard that Prabhupada wanted to institute, but as passionate youth from the West with no training, he gave a minimum. So that's that minimum that has to be maintained. But if you read closely Prabhupada's books, he's always encouraging us to chant Hare Krishna more and more. And that means japa, kirtan, sankirtan, preaching, discussing the preaching. It's all kirtan.
I want to ask you a question that one of our members, one of our readers has submitted. And this question is regarding having female body devotees leading kirtan in the temple. Is it ever appropriate? When is it appropriate? If yes, and what are the considerations in this?
Although I wasn't personally present, from the things that I've read in the memories, Siddhanta's memories, and watched the videos and books that have come out, Srila Prabhupada, he wanted to train someone to chant kirtan nicely. He was training one of his brahmacharis, and the brahmachari wasn't capable of following Prabhupada's instructions. So he started to train Jamuna. I'm sure anyone who wants to can read the biography written about her, and when Prabhupada trained her to chant these Govinda prayers and other prayers. So he personally trained Jamuna Mataji to chant the Govinda prayers. And when Prabhupada took this phase 2 to India, he had accomplished what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told him to do, and then he wanted to bring it back to India to transform India into Krishna consciousness. When there were only 40 devotees traveling with Prabhupada, he would sometimes have Jamuna lead the kirtans. He would have Kaushalya chant also. You can read about these things, though I wasn't personally there. And they would chant Ishopanishad. Kaushalya knew Ishopanishad by heart. And some of the Indians would criticize that they don't know the pronunciation of Sanskrit properly. And Prabhupada would blast those people that they know so much more than you. How can you criticize? So Prabhupada didn't reject that the females could chant kirtan, chant the prayers. He would have Jamuna sing. He wouldn't have everyone sing. He would have those devotees who he had trained to sing. But then there was a shift. And that shift came from what I've heard from Jamuna. Achyutananda, who had been here in India for some time, explained to her that in India the etiquette is quite different, because Jamuna used to sit right next to Prabhupada and listen to him intently. He said the women sit in the back. They have it's a different etiquette here. So she started to follow that etiquette, and then Prabhupada asked her, "Where were you? You don't like to hear my classes anymore?" And she explained what Achyutananda told her, and Prabhupada approved of that. That yes, it's better to learn the etiquette now here in India. So when I came to India in 1974, by that time, that was already instituted. I immediately came here to Vrindavan, was living with Jamuna and the other Matajis who had been here with Prabhupada at that time. And they had already resigned themselves to the Indian etiquette of women being in the back and women not taking the forefront, leading kirtans and things like that, unless Prabhupada would ask them to do so. So there was that transition when Krishna consciousness was brought to India, that the etiquette that's been followed in India for, how do you say it, immemorially, since the beginning of time, that we start instituting that now in ISKCON as well. But still, when the temple was first inaugurated here in Vrindavan, there was just a skeleton crew here of devotees. Not many devotees wanted to stay here. It was the middle of the summer, and they were getting sick. There were just a few of us here. And we had a big job to do because suddenly we had 14 deities, the guest house, the Gurukul construction was going on, all, a massive temple, the first real temple in ISKCON, and just a few of us were here. So each one of us had to take part in Kirtan, the 24-hour Kirtan. And we were assigned times, and we would all chant together. We had to chant. Anyone who was in the temple, we had to all chant. Minimum 1 hour, 2 hours a day. It was supposed to be 4 hours a day, but because Prabhupada, he adjusted it that if they have service to do, then they don't have to do that the full 4 hours. But we were all chanting in the 24-hour Kirtan, and some of the women were very good singers, Arundhati and others, so they would be leading right in the temple. So that was 1975. And then in 1976, Prabhupada came in 75, and then he came again 76, the Mayapur Vrindavan festival. And Prabhupada's secretary had changed then. It was Pushta Krishna Swami, who was a new Swami. And Pushta Krishna, this is what I was told by Prabhupada's servants, he made an objection to Srila Prabhupada that according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, a brahmachari, a sannyasi, shouldn't hear the singing of women, and that was why they stopped Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was rushing towards that beautiful singing that he heard. So, these women singing in the temple, maybe they shouldn't be leading the kirtans because it's not good for the brahmacharis and sannyasis to hear the women singing. So I remember the day, and I remember seeing Prabhupada walk into the temple that day, and then all of a sudden, the next day we were instructed that from now on, the men can lead in the kirtans. And it created an uproar, not to me, because I wasn't a kirtan leader, it didn't matter to me, but amongst those who were very attached to leading the kirtans, they felt dejected and slighted and outraged. But considering the fact that it might have been agitating or disturbing to another member, other members of the society, I understood it. I didn't, it didn't matter to me who led the kirtan. It just mattered that we were engaged in kirtan. It was, I consider it to be a rather egotistic thing, that it doesn't matter who leads the kirtan. Chant Hare Krishna. Because even I was told, we don't hear Prabhupada say everything, but his servants tell us what Prabhupada said, that the kirtan leaders, it's most difficult, and when the kirtan leaders are looking in the eyes they shouldn't be looking in the eyes of the other devotees when they're chanting. They should be looking at the deities, things like that. To me, it didn't matter who was leading the kirtan, but to those who were very attached to hearing their own voices, it mattered very much to them. So, but it didn't matter because Prabhupada had made the rule, and that was the rule. That was 1976. And then 1977, when Srila Prabhupada disappeared, and then Prabhupada's Samadhi was being begun, the construction was begun, the women took shelter there, and they were chanting kirtan there. The same women who used to chant in the temple now went over to Prabhupada's Samadhi and were chanting there. So that kind of balanced things off a bit, that they weren't chanting publicly in the temple, but they were chanting to Prabhupada. And then to balance that even more, we started kirtan in Prabhupada's house, where the women were also allowed to chant and lead the kirtan in Prabhupada's house. So there was then an avenue for women who wanted to chant publicly, although they didn't get what they wanted, they still had something, They could chant for Prabhupada. If you really want to chant, you can chant anywhere. But some people are very antagonistic to get what they want just for, whatever their purposes are, without understanding that you can chant Hare Krishna anywhere. And if it's going to be a disturbance to somebody, then why do you want to disturb other devotees? We had an experience in Bombay with Srila Prabhupada. one devotee was doing one service, another devotee was doing another service, and they clashed and they started a fist fight right in front of Prabhupada. I can tell you the details if you want to hear it, but anyway, Prabhupada had to break them up, and he gave this axiom that we should not do any service that causes inconvenience to another devotee's service. So if the sannyasis, if the brahmacharis are getting agitated by the women singing, then why would we want to agitate sannyasis and brahmacharis? We can chant someplace else. It doesn't matter. So that's my very conservative and orthodox take on the whole issue, that if somebody doesn't want you to chant, then why would you want to chant? Chant someplace else where you're appreciated. And there's plenty of places where women can chant where they're appreciated. It doesn't have to be just at that one place. So, and then, of course, depending upon I only know Vrindavan, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. They would allow the women to chant like once a week for the Damodar prayers or whatever. There were concessions made because they would make such an uproar. But I never agreed to the uproars. I never agreed to the whole issue, because there are plenty of places to chant Hare Krishna where you'll be appreciated. So why fight? Why argue? So I'm sorry. I'm sure this will displease 90% of the women who are hearing this or whoever. But living in Vrindavan, understanding the culture better, seeing the etiquette, seeing how Prabhupada dealt with the issue under these circumstances in Vrindavan, I understand why Prabhupada made that decision. I fully respect it, and accommodation was made for the women to chant in other places. So I don't know why they can't be happy with that. That's all. That's all I have to say about it. Okay?
Thank you for sharing. It's quite some new history for me that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And speaking of new history, you said if I want more details about the fist fight incident, you could provide.
Yeah. Okay. So this was 1975 in Bombay. Prabhupada had just come back from his African trip, and there were quite a few people who wanted to serve Srila Prabhupada. But I was assigned as Prabhupada's cook and housekeeper. That was like what I did wherever Prabhupada was, wherever I went. So I was cooking for Prabhupada, taking care of his house. But Prabhupada had picked up a new secretary, Hare Krishna at the time. And there was another brahmachari who was very enthusiastic to serve Prabhupada, and that was Navayogendra Das. So they managed that Prabhupada sent me and my husband to Delhi to be the pujari of Radha Parthasarathi. Tejas needed someone there desperately. So we left, and then it was the two of them. So they were very happy that I was gone, because then they could do the cooking and all the things that they wanted to do. So Harikesh was cooking, and Navayogendra, he was the servant, massaging Prabhupada, getting his bath ready, things like that. So Navayogendra, he would plug in the hot water heater, and when he would plug in the hot water heater, it would electrify the water tap in the kitchen, so that Harikesh, every time he touched the water tap, he would get a shock. So again and again, Harikesh told Navayogendra, don't turn on the water heater while I'm cooking. And Navayogendra would turn on the water heater. So finally it reached a crescendo, and Harikesh comes running out of the kitchen, and they start a fight right in front of Prabhupada, because Navayogendra's there. And it was a fist fight. Harikesh personally told me this afterwards, because he came afterwards and apologized to me that I'm so sorry we sent you away. I understood what was going on then, because he said that he gave this as an example. So then Prabhupada had to break them up, and he gave that rule that one should never perform a service that causes inconvenience to another devotee's service. So I keep that as a major law in my life, that if I see that something I'm doing is going to disturb a devotee in their service, then I'm very careful to think twice. Now, someone might say, well, you're disturbing us by not allowing the women to lead the kirtan. Well, yes, but that Prabhupada's decision was, at that time in 1976, that it's better the women don't lead the kirtan in the main temple. So we allow Prabhupada to make major decisions like that, rather than our own mental speculation of what's the best thing to do. Because Prabhupada did make that decision at that time, and that decision has remained practically intact since 1976 here in Vrindavan. I can't speak for the rest of the world because I don't know any place else. Okay?
So you're mentioning how the women have opportunities to lead kirtan elsewhere.
Yes.
Could you share a little bit more details about these opportunities for them?
Well, we have in our samadhi, we have kirtan going on the whole time the samadhi's open, and there's plenty of time they can still sing when the samadhi's not open. They can do 24-hour kirtan for Prabhupada in his samadhi. We have in Prabhupada's house every evening from the time of his arti at 7:25 up until the house closes. We have kirtan going on, nice bhajan kirtan with harmonium and different singers. So many women are leading kirtan there, very nice kirtan singers. We have unlimited preaching programs to colleges, to schools, to different house programs. No one is stopping the women from singing in that place. The only restriction Prabhupada made was directly in front of the deities during the public kirtans, and that was because sannyasis and brahmacharis might become disturbed. That was it. That was the only restriction that I know of. Anywhere else in the world, I never heard that Prabhupada made a restriction.
Thank you so much, Mataji. We're grateful to you for your clarity and words of wisdom. Would you like to share a message for our audience before we conclude?
Chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Jai.
you so much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai.